My sister is getting married at the end of this year, and I gave birth to my son about 3 weeks ago. Everyone was happy about this except for my mother, who is obviously upset because nothing matters to her more than her darling baby, which happens to be my little sister. My jealous mother tried in secret to put my baby up for adoption in order to protect my sister's wedding, but she is now facing jail time, and I'm not backing down. It would have been one thing if my sister had been the type of person who wanted a small wedding and would have planned it quickly, but she wanted an elaborate and grand wedding, which would obviously take a lot of time. And she and her fiancé had been dating for 3 years when I was 6 months pregnant. Anyone who knows math would know that by the time my sister got married, I would have already given birth to the baby. Quite explicit about that from the start, but even so, a few weeks after their engagement, my mother showed up at my house, looking very anxious and all that, and she told me that she wanted to take action regarding my pregnancy because she did not want me to upset my sister. My sister and I are not at all close. She is a spoiled brat. And the only reason I stayed was because we haven't spoken since my father died a few years ago. I had promised my dad that I would take care of her after his death because he didn't think my sister would be able to handle it. She was simply too careless. Despite the fact that my sister had always been my mom's favorite, I had done everything in my power to keep up a relationship with her until recently, when she showed up at my house to inform me that she was engaged and getting married. I assumed she had just come over to. I told her that she was being overly cautious because, first of all, it's not like people would skip her wedding because I had a baby or anything, and I wasn't even going to be invited. She continued by telling me that since I was giving birth the same year she was getting married, it would take away her limelight because obviously a pregnancy was a bigger milestone than a wedding. I don't even understand what that was about. I assumed that these were all valid points, but my mother told me that I needed to keep my pregnancy and my baby hidden from everyone in the family and all our friends. She hadn't even been invited to my wedding because we're not friends, so there was no way that I could overshadow her. I wouldn't even be there, and she and my mom had nothing to worry about. I'm not some celebrity, so I was pretty sure that even at her wedding, nobody would be talking about me or my baby. Common friends as well, because she didn't want me to steal my sister's limelight. I thought that was crazy, and we got into a big argument. After that, I stopped talking to her. I felt bad about not keeping my word to my father, but I had no choice because she was clearly acting crazy, and since I was already pregnant and very irritable, I couldn't take her stupid statement any longer. My mother wasn't even present for the child's birth. My husband had called her that day, but she had declined to come because she was out with my sister. I'm fairly certain that even if she hadn't been out with her, she wouldn't have shown up because I'm just not a priority for her. And that's the bitter truth if she could have abandoned her own daughter and our family relationship because she believed that I was stealing my sister's limelight simply by giving birth, and I had nothing to say to her. As a result, we had no communication at all, and I was okay with it. However, a few days ago, she called me, and when I didn't answer at first, she began frantically texting me, telling me to answer because she needed to speak with me about something really important that had happened. I found out that she is in legal trouble because she attempted to place my baby for adoption without our consent, and the adoption agency discovered it was a case of fraud and misrepresentation because it appears she had contacted an adoption agency. I was really hesitant to speak with her, but I kept thinking about the promise I had made to my father and decided to answer her. I'm glad I did. Agency and falsely claimed to have power of attorney because my husband and I were both addicts, and the court had determined that we were unfit to care for our child. As the baby's custodial caregiver, she chose to place him for adoption, but they quickly discovered that all of the paperwork she had provided was fraudulent and halted the process. Now, they were going to take this up legally, and essentially, she was calling me. She had been told that they were going to take legal action against her because she was afraid of what was going to happen next, and she would be served in a few days. However, before they could figure out how to get in touch with me and let me know, she chose to tell me about it herself so that I could somehow help her. She had been sobbing on the phone and pleading with me to help her, but I couldn't even comprehend how she could expect me to assist her when she has done something so heinous. I could see why she wanted my sister to be the center of attention, but going out of her way to place my baby for adoption was disgusting and, in my opinion, rather foolish as well, since it will only draw more attention to me, because I now intend to sue her as well. After she gave me the rundown, I ended the call because I had nothing more to say to her. I no longer felt sorry for her. In fact, I believed that she deserved this. To make matters worse, the adoption agency called me later that day to inform me of the situation and allow me to take the necessary action. I had already spoken to my husband following my mother's phone call, and after the adoption agency contacted us as well, we both agreed that we would take legal action against her as well, because we talked to a lawyer the next day, because there was no way she could do that and expect to get away with it. A few days later, we filed a civil lawsuit against her, and the proceedings will begin shortly. However, because of the seriousness of the situation, she has also been charged with a crime, so there is little to no room for mediation. The best she can hope for is an out-of-court settlement, or perhaps a plea deal. She is currently under house arrest, but she could still face jail time for the criminal charges. Nevertheless, she can still reach me, which is why she keeps sending me emails pleading with me to help her in some way. At the very least, she's been apologizing and telling me that she just got carried away because she was very upset with my decision to not hide my pregnancy and my baby for my sister's sake. But she clearly knows that it was a mess, upthink, to do, and she truly apologizes for it. I had been able to ignore her up until yesterday, but she reminded me that I had promised my father that I would always look out for her no matter what, and that this didn't seem like taking care of her right now. That kind of caught me off guard because I had that private conversation with my father, and I didn't even know that she was aware of that promise. So am I the forgiving one now? I've decided not to drop the civil lawsuit against my mother for attempting to place my child for adoption without my knowledge or consent. She deserves this, and she brought this on herself. I'm not going to back down because of the promise I made. I've taken it very seriously for the past couple of years since my father passed away, and I've done my best to keep my word. But right now it's just, many people have criticized me for even bothering to keep my word for so long, when it was so clear that my mother couldn't care less about me. But I don't know if you guys have ever lost a parent that heavy, and I lost my father to cancer. So this was literally a case of emotional manipulation at its best, which is why I almost fell for it too, by using my father to defend myself. Nothing can make me change my mind now that I've made up my mind. And even my husband believes I made the right decision. I'm not even asking for a lot of money. I just want her to reimburse me for the money I've spent on her over the last couple of years. I don't know about everyone else, but that's not the kind of thing that I can take lightly. Which is why I've been putting up with my mother for so long. But this is crossing a line. My father probably asked me to be there for my mom because I have been taking care of her for years because my sister wouldn't spend a dime on her. To be fair to her though, she doesn't spend any money on anyone but herself, so it's not very surprising. However, I don't think he could have seen something like this happening at any point in the future. I'm sure he will forgive me for this. But even if he doesn't, I still have to. I also considered the fact that the money she owes me won't cost her anything because I know for a fact that my father left her the house and a sizable amount of money, so she will be able to make ends meet. In addition, she has her brother to look after her after me, so even if she loses everything due to this misplaced suit, I won't be concerned because I have done everything in my power to protect her. It has been a few weeks since my last update, and we are currently in the process of mediating since everyone wants to settle the civil lawsuit out of court. It hasn't been going well so far, and we have had to end every session after a while because my mother would not accept anything less than my very best efforts. And I don't think anything will ever be enough for her. I'm done trying to be a good daughter. I'm just a mother now. And that's my only priority update. I don't know if that's her tactic or if she's truly losing it, but whatever the case, it's just postponing the inevitable. And I don't think she understands that there is no way out of this for her. My uncle has also tried to persuade me to back off, telling me that the amount I'm asking her to pay as a settlement is far too large and unjust. He has also brought up she was the one who had raised me since I was a baby, so it is really rude of me to not forgive her for one small mistake. However, the mistake was more serious than that. She had actually falsified documentation, and I doubt that she could have concluded that it was all planned if it had been an impulsive decision. The frightening part is that, by some chance, the adoption was planned. The more I consider this a situation, the less forgiving I feel, and the more I believe that no amount of money will ever make up for what she did. At least I'm being kind enough to only demand whatever I've spent on her so far. Not a single dollar more. Of course, that's not mentioned anywhere in the paperwork, so he wouldn't know that. But even when I told him that, he still told me, nay, the agency not done its due diligence. She probably wouldn't even have been caught. That it was incredibly unfair of me to do so. And after a while, I became upset. I didn't want to argue with him because up until now, my uncle and I had a good relationship. and I didn't want to ruin it. But since he seemed determined to do just that, I did. I told him that if he truly cared about his sister, perhaps he should just help her out by offering to pay the settlement himself. Then we could finish this much more quickly. At that point, he began yelling at me and calling me derogatory names. So I hung up the phone because it was obvious there was no use in talking to him any longer. I don't even understand how anyone could find themselves defending her at this time, considering the situation. On the one hand, I had my uncle, and on the other, I had my sister, who has been unbearable since learning about the lawsuit against I don't know why. But my mother has been painting me as the bad guy in this situation, saying that I'm doing this to exact revenge on her and my father for not giving me enough attention. At least my uncle had the courage to confront me directly. But she has been talking behind my back to everyone we know, which is how the lawsuit was discovered by everyone in the family. I really didn't want that to happen, because I didn't want to answer questions because this is very personal and somewhat upsetting, and I didn't think I needed to talk to anyone about it. However, since she has been talking non-stop about it, people have been asking me a lot of questions and contacting me as well. So even though I didn't want to discuss it with anyone at the moment, I'm forced to do so because eventually the bigger issue is the narrative my sister has been setting up. Like I got vindictive and stuff, which is why I'm pursuing this legally. I don't even think she understands the gravity of what our mother has been trying to do. And this is not some sort of sibling rivalry that is going on. I may have to get them to testify if this goes to court. So I'm just comforting myself by telling myself that this was bound to come out at some point. So better now than later, appearing in the form of lawsuits and other things. I don't even understand how someone can be so self-centered and foolish. But since it's my sister, it's not shocking. In any case, I've been talking to the rest of my family, and it's funny that this whole thing began because my mother wanted my sister's wedding to be the most anticipated event of the year, so she wanted me to conceal although it sounds trashy. To say aloud, it's really just poetic justice for my sister, because now not even her wedding can top something like this. This is going to be the family highlight for a long time to come because of her own actions. I hate to admit it, but it's pretty scandalous from a gossip point of view, and if I hadn't been directly involved in this, I probably would have found it pretty juicy as well. Hello, this is the third update. My mother has accepted our terms, and we will soon receive our settlement money. However, she is still being tried for her criminal charges, and she and her attorney are working to get her out of this situation without going to jail. As far as I know, things are looking bleak at the moment. The prosecution and the adoption agency have already asked me to testify, so we will see how that goes. It has been a few weeks since our last update, and so far, everything is going well for our family. We even managed to smuggle in a quick weekend trip with our sons so we could go and see his great-grandparents. I don't mean my grandparents, who are no longer with us, but thankfully my husband's grandparents' parents are still living. And I went to see them and told them about everything that was going on in our family. They told me that I was doing the right thing by standing up for my child, and I even shared my guilt about breaking my promise to my father. However, they assured me that I had nothing to feel bad about because if my father had been around, he would have likely told me to go for it because this is just crazy, which made me feel much better about everything, even though my mother and I had previously had disagreements. They had never reached this level in the last few sessions with our lawyers. I suppose I needed a change of scenery, because when I returned, I felt really refreshed. However, it had been a very upsetting experience for me thus far, because she had likely realized that yelling and ending our sessions would not improve anything, and eventually, I believe it's a good thing, because she doesn't deserve to feel like she has the right to even see me, my uncle, and my sister anymore. If it went to court, it would probably end even worse for her, so she probably decided to behave herself and let her lawyer do all the talking. She would hardly ever look at me, and even when she did, she would look at me quickly, as if she couldn't bring herself to even glance at me. Are still actively spreading hate against me in the family. But that hardly matters to me because anybody who wants to be on my side is going to be on my side nevertheless. And people who just want to gossip, I'm sure that they are going to stick to the sidelines and not actively get involved, so they don't pose any threat to me. And as long as that's happening, I'm fine with whatever they're saying about me, because I'm secure enough to know that it won't make it the although they claim. It's update 4. It's been a little more than a month since my last update, and my mother had accepted my terms. A few weeks ago, our settlement money finally arrived, and we are putting it aside for our son's future, because we can live without it at the moment. In any case, this was the money we were owed, because it was what I had been spending on my mother. Over the previous 2 years, despite the fact that my sister is aware that her father passed away, she showed up the other day and began accusing me of ruining her wedding because, allegedly, our mother had promised her that she would cover a portion of the costs. And now that I had sued her and taken back all of her money, our mother will no longer be able to fulfill that promise, and it's all my fault. It was absurd because, literally, as she was screaming at me about it, she revealed it's not like she didn't know what was going on, and even though she knew that I had returned all the money she had taken back, which meant that it was originally mine, she still felt that it was appropriate to be yelling at me rather than asking why this was all happening. When she arrived, I hadn't even let her in. So I had been talking to her at the door, and as soon as she began yelling at me, I slammed the door shut because I didn't need this. I was already very busy at work, trying to work from home while on maternity leave to avoid being overburdened when I returned. I also had to take care of my son, so I didn't have time for this drama. But even after I closed the door, she didn't get the message and kept yelling outside about how unfair everything had been for her. After some time, when she hadn't left, I began to grow irritated, so I called the police. Within a few minutes, they arrived, and as they were dragging her away, she began to curse at me so loudly that even the neighbors, who had likely been watching from behind the curtains until then, came out to see what was happening. It was very embarrassing, and she said a number of alarming things about me and my child. I don't want to repeat that, but as soon as I called the police, my husband returned home earlier than usual, and I told him what my sister had been saying, or rather, threatening us with, while the police were dragging her away. One of the officers even suggested that we file for a restraining order because it was clear that something really wrong was happening. They were pretty threatening, and I didn't feel comfortable with it at all. With her. And we do believe that it would be wise to proceed with the restraining order, because now that I think about it, I truly don't feel safe anymore. She not only knows my address, but she also knows how to get in touch with me. And if she decided to try to make me feel uneasy, she could easily succeed in doing so. I'm not saying that she will carry out her threats, but even aside from that, there are other methods to intimidate someone, and I'm just afraid that since I'm a mother now, I don't want situations like this to happen again. So, after a lengthy conversation with my husband, we decided to move, and I had already planned to change my phone number and other contact information so that people couldn't reach me without first building a good relationship with me. It's not just about my sister though. I've received a lot of messages and phone calls. My husband has been doing well for himself, so if we need help, we can ask my in-laws for it as well. But we will definitely be moving, and we will definitely be filing for a restraining order against my sister. Calls from people who just wanted to gossip are getting really annoying at this point. So that was another reason I changed everything. We've had to pay for our lawyer, and of course we have a newborn with us, so even that's pretty expensive. Our finances have been a little tight lately, and with the move and everything, it's probably going to get even more expensive for us. But when I think about my son, it seems worth the trouble. I'm just really tired because she's obviously unhinged, and I don't want her around anymore, of everything. But my husband and my son are the only ones who inspire me to keep going and work harder. I don't think I've expressed it enough, but I'm really happy and fortunate to have found a partner who truly understands me, and I consider myself fortunate that even his family has supported me during all of this. To be honest, after my dad passed away, my in-laws were the ones who helped me the most, even more than my own mother, and I know for a fact that since not everyone is fortunate enough to have such amazing in-laws, I'm also very grateful for them. It's been a very hectic and draining couple of months, and I'm just hoping that it ends soon. Update 5. Last week, the verdict of my mother's trial finally came in, and she was found guilty on all charges. Since she's a first-time offender, she will have to pay a hefty fine as restitution to both that she has been able to avoid jail time, thanks to my adoption agency, a few hours of community service, and a court-mandated mental health treatment program in a rehabilitation center because her lawyer made it appear as though she had been dealing with psychological issues. I haven't spoken to her since she accepted the terms of our civil lawsuit, and we reached a settlement, which I learned about from we are in the process of moving houses, which is a little stressful, but we can handle it, especially with the money that's coming in. It's been a huge relief for us, so we might not even need to dip into the bank to ask our in-laws for help. I also managed to get a restraining order against my sister shortly after my last update, so that's another victory. For me, it's all worked out for us because we decided to set aside settlement money for our son, Although my mother was fortunate legally, she wasn't as fortunate in her personal life. I've been hearing a lot of rumors and have even received screenshots of my sister's most recent social media post, in which she has condemned everything her mother has done thus far, even going so far as to say that she didn't know about any of this until recently, and that she doesn't agree with my mother's actions, and believes she should be convicted, despite the fact that she had not been telling me that before everything went wrong. From what I understand, she had been firmly on our mother's side before everything went wrong, and she did this because her fiancé and her in-laws were uncomfortable with the idea of him marrying into a family like this, which is actually quite understandable. And they had been thinking about delaying the she chose to publicly cut off our mother because of her wedding, which is terrible for our mother, because she had devoted her life to my sister. And now this is what she gets. It's pretty, sad, but well earned. I don't feel sorry for you. For her, now that I'm relocating, I'm not going to be related to these people, and I are eagerly awaiting